I'd like to introduce our next panel. Unfortunately, one of our participants, Baruch Feigenbaum from the Reason Foundation, unfortunately, ironically rather, had a medical issue and is not going to be able to join us today. But we have three outstanding panelists, and I will turn it over to who's going first.
All right. As a cyclist, I look on these things that we see out through these windows rather a little differently from you do. You don't like them. Well, I know that for people like me, they are dangerously dangerous, fatally dangerous. Damn near killed me when I tested one of these 40 years ago. 40 years ago, and the knowledge has not yet sunk in. Now, I'm going to use one phrase that I want you to remember, and one set of statistics that I also want you to remember. The phrase is motordom. Now, I'm going to be charitable and say that motordom means the organizations and the people associated with them who think that private motor transport is a public good. You can think other things about it too. It does not, that phrase, include oil companies, road builders, or motor car builders. They batten off the fact that we have motor transportation, but they don't particularly promote it. There are people who also are against motoring, anti-motorists. We'll talk about them in a bit. Now, the statistics I want you to remember, and these come from the most robust data set of car-bike collisions that exists in the world. The data were collected by Ken Cross on a contract from the National Highway Safety Administration. You see, they didn't know what kind of data would show up. And they got what Ken Cross collected very carefully, looking at all aspects of each particular collision in 4 states that were presumed to be sort of like a selection of American states over 1 year period. And Cross set out a report with, in the long form, all his data sheets and words. But Cross did not understand the meaning of the data that he had collected. So he provided, in the words of his report, conventional wisdom. Now, I looked at his data sheets, all of them, and I analyzed them according to one really great issue. The great issue is same direction motor traffic extremely dangerous to cyclists or not? And when you look at his data, you find that only 5% of car-bike collisions come from same direction motor traffic, the motor traffic coming up behind the cyclist. 95% of car-bike collisions are caused by turning and crossing maneuvers by either or both participants. So, motordom, remember my definition. Statistics, remember that 5% from behind, 95% of car-bike collisions from turning and crossing maneuvers. Now, you may think that what you see out through these windows is something that was produced by, bicycle activists, people like that. Well, the trouble is you're wrong. The thinking that built those things comes from motordom. Yeah, you people and your motoring organizations promoted the thinking that produced this mess outside here. You've got to take responsibility for this, and only if you do can we clean up this kind of mess where it occurs. Why? Listen, I'm going to tell you some history. About early 1920s, motordom had frightened pedestrians off the roadway. They were frightened off in cities on the sidewalks, and in rural areas, walk on the left side of the road facing traffic so you can see when traffic is coming and get off the road and get out of the way. Well, when motordom won that battle by 1925, they thought, now we'll frighten the cyclists off the roadway. They didn't bother, you notice, to try and frighten off horse-drawn carriages and wagons, because those were dying. They didn't worry about them, but bicycle riding was useful, and so people kept on doing it. And therefore they realized, if we're going to get these people out of our way, we're going to have to work hard at it. With pedestrians, they had pictures, sketches of jaywalkers being run down by motorists. Well, that worked fine for pedestrians, but when they tried to do that for cyclists, the only picture they could show is a motorist coming up behind a cyclist and running him down. Clearly unlawful, dangerous behavior by motorists. So they couldn't use pictures, they used words instead. And they passed around the following kind of thoughts. Cyclists are unable to obey the rules of the road. Well, that's been disproven, but still. That justified pushing the cyclists into a lower category than motorists. Before 1925, everybody on the roadway had equal rights. Now, they didn't. And the program had a legal aspect. By 1944, the Uniform Vehicle Code contained two nasty cyclist laws. One being the far to the right law, which prohibited cyclists from using about 80% of the width of the road, or more in multi-case, or less on a multi-lane road. And the other one was it prohibited cyclists from using the roadway at all if there was a usable path alongside the road. Now, the far to the right law got from the Uniform Vehicle Code into the California Vehicle Code in 1963. And who promoted it? Why? The Highway Patrol. They said, this is just the law we need. It's so simple that even children can understand it. When the first official government committee started to look at that, they said that far to the right law is the most controversial part of the California Vehicle Code because nobody understands how to implement it. They don't know what it means. Yet the highway patrol, because this pushed cyclists out of motorists' way, the highway patrol promoted that law as being so simple that even children could understand it. Meaning, of course, the children who ride bicycles. Now, this situation where motordom was managing to push around cyclists worked for motoring. Motordom got what it wanted, as long as cyclists had no political power. They could push cyclists off the road, frighten them. Okay. Now, motordom tried to implement both these new laws in California in 1970. And what happened? They ran up against the California Association of Bicycling Organizations, led by me, who was an engineer and a long-term cyclist. We proved that this was all wrong, that the greatest danger to cyclists is not same-direction motor traffic, but turning and crossing traffic. Now, you look out here, this mess you see in front, out those windows, is hypothecated on the basis that the greatest danger to cyclists is same-direction motor traffic. But if you manage to protect cyclists against that, that's only 5% of the car-bike collisions. And you fouled up the traffic pattern so bad that it makes the 95% harder to comply with. You can't see what you're supposed to be seeing in order to avoid collisions, and you get this mess. Well, how are you going to get rid of it? The only thing that motordom can do, remember, motordom is responsible for creating the thoughts that made these side paths that you don't like. The only thing you can do is to call back, persuade cyclists and scooter users and all the other little things they have nowadays, get them to obey the rules of the road so that everybody on the roadway obeys the same rules. The rules of the road for drivers of vehicles. And then those who wish to go slowly, they can use sidewalks, provided that they use the sidewalks in the manner that walking pedestrians use them. With a system like that, you have rational road rules for the road, rational rules for the walking spaces and slow speed wheel traffic, and you can sort out these problems so that you can now say, no, these things are not designed for the safety of cyclists, because the most they could do is to cut down traffic collisions by 5% while making 95% worse. Well, that's something that you, as members of motordom, you've got to promote, making sure that all roadway users obey the rules of the road, because that's what makes it going safe and what makes it rational for everybody. Thank you.
Since a lot of my presentation was already made by various speakers in the first panel, I'm going to go through this stuff fairly quickly. Now, I went to a lot of trouble to bring all my equipment. I like to point at things. Unfortunately, after getting my world champion laser here, which is classified by the United States Army as an auxiliary anti-aircraft weapon, what do I get but a flat screen, which if you use a laser, blind somebody in the second row, but I'm ready. This is a piece that Jim Moore and I, Jim, wave, there you go, in the back, put together on LA Metro's current plan for long-range transportation. It sucketh, and it's available on the website. You have the email, the address, and if you're interested in how bad they're doing in other things, take a look. Okay. These are some definitions, not from me, but from supporters. So don't blame me. I'm not going to spend any time on them. They're there. Understand them. They believe. Whether it's right or not doesn't matter. Let's see how LA is doing in terms of transportation. This is the most commonly used index for traffic congestion, which is the travel time index, which is the ratio of the time it takes to travel during peak against off-peak. So if you have a 1.20, means it takes 20% longer off-peak than during peak. I think you can probably tell from this that LA has not been doing real well. Despite getting 4 different half-cent sales taxes since 1980. And what has that money been going for? Well, hard to say, but it's not been going for improving transportation. Okay, this is ridership. MTA is primarily a transit agency, and over 80% of its staff and a higher percent of its budget goes to transit, and ridership has been going up and down like a yo-yo. We have the period from 82 to 85 where we have this rapid increase, 40% in 3 years. We went from an 85 cent fare to a 50-cent fare. It exploded. Okay, says the decision makers, that was really interesting. Okay, now let's cancel it and try something else. So they raised the fares, the money went into building rail and operating rail, and ridership dropped like a rock. Then we sued. Labor Community Strategy Center v. MTA. We got a consent decree, and ridership went back up almost to the 83, 85 peak. Then the consent decree was over, and again, well, that was interesting, but we finally got rid of it. So now we can go back to the real thing we're here for, which has nothing to do with carrying people. It has to do with spending money to build really nifty transportation projects.
Could you go back to the prior slide for a minute, please? Why is it flat between 2008? Was that the recession?
Yeah. Okay. From this, I think we can probably agree that things are not going real well. And what is the answer? More of the same with a lot more money and faster. So if you aren't doing well, let's see if we can make our mistakes a lot faster. Let's look at the reality. How do people get around? This is from the University of Minnesota Accessibility Observatory. Again, you've got the links in the paper or in the PowerPoint, which is available on the website. What this says is this is how many jobs you can access in that period of time, that's in millions, by auto, by transit plus walking, that's both of them combined, and by bicycle. Gee, what do you think more people are likely to use? This is the same data presented in percentage. So in an hour, you can get to 75% of the jobs by auto, 5.7% by transit plus walking, 1.9%. By the way, don't add these. Those are separate. There's a lot of double counting. A lot of those are the same jobs. Now, how do people get around? That was how many jobs you can access. This is what they actually used. Again, American Community Survey. And 83.5% are on the road. 5.3%, which is about the only thing besides drive alone that's increasing, is work at home. And here's what you have in the middle here. One thing to keep in mind is that transit is very slow. So the people that are using transit generally are taking short trips to work. If they take long trips, transit for most of them just doesn't work. There are some exceptions. If you're really lucky and you have a high-speed rail line at your home that takes you to your job across the street, then good for you. It works for you. Both of you. Okay. Very important, freight. The vast majority, the overwhelming majority of freight in an urban center such as LA moves on the roads, mainly in trucks. And then there's the buyers who are taking things home. Again, we don't see a lot of bike racks outside IKEA. There are some things you just cannot do on a bike. For those of you that do work on a bike and like to shop on a bike, again, great for you. You are in a small minority. And it would be nice if one of the principles was the greatest good for the greatest number. Roads are also vital for our regional and national traffic, particularly the Port of LA. And even after billions of dollars have been spent to try to improve the rail connections, a very high percentage of the loads that are coming off container ships in the largest container ports in the US are still going on the road. And there is no real alternative to that anytime in the near future. Okay. Again, you've seen part of this before. I'll go through it quickly. This is the common knowledge about LA, and it's absolutely, totally wrong. And let's see the actual details. Some of the data is a little bit different because this came all from the same source, Federal Highway, and they don't update population except on the census, and the last one is 2010. So population density, again, number one, not even close. Freeway centerline miles per capita, second to last. Second to last. Sarasota, Florida, beat us out.
What does that mean?
Miles of freeway. Freeway centerline miles. That's going in each direction. A freeway going in each direction. That's the common measurement. Second to last. Okay.
Is that lane miles?
No. LA does have the widest freeways in the U.S. by far. If you go by lane miles, we do much better. We're, I think, the 87th percentile. So we do have a lot of lane miles relative to centerline miles, but frankly, centerline miles are a lot more important because as you widen freeways, they don't operate as well. Trying to just get on and off and crossing all of those lanes and make transfers to other freeways is very, very difficult. And also the on and off ramps. So centerline miles are generally considered to be more important than freeway lane miles. You get more, of course, if you look at both pieces of data and you know what you're doing. Total road miles also, second to last. Honolulu beat us on that one. Vehicle miles traveled per capita. LA really doesn't drive all that much. We honestly don't even make the first half. One of the main reasons is we have a lot of very low income people here. LA County is remarkably poor. And a lot of people don't understand it, particularly the ones that want to raise taxes. There aren't that many people to tax here. But that is not going to stop them from trying. Now, this one, wow. Average freeway vehicle miles per lane mile. No one else remotely close. Absolutely not close. Now, what is actually going on here? We have a strange thing that a lot of people, particularly those in government, decision makers and planners, don't understand. You have heard that we have a very small downtown. For the size of the urbanized area, our downtown, in terms of square feet in the city center, is minuscule, well under half of what would be expected for an urbanized area this size. Why? Because we have distributed downtowns. I mean, How about Century City, Warner Center? Heck, just go through the former movie backlots. And then Glendale, Pasadena, Long Beach. I can go on and on and on. We've got something like 27 mini downtowns. What does that mean? What that means is that driving works very well here, even though you think it's slow, because our people here are taking shorter trips on arterials that are performing relatively well because they aren't going to the same place that everybody else is going to downtown. So our trips are distributed at both ends. And that is crucial to what Wendell pointed out, that we have the best type of movement for megacities in the world, because we have stayed away from two things for decades. We have stayed away from a huge city center, and we have stayed away from building rail. That's what's worked. Okay. But the basic problem you have is when you're trying to find solutions, you need to know what you're doing, and you need to know what the situation is. And unfortunately, we're dealing with a large number of people who don't understand that. Okay, let's do a little analysis. On a arterial lane at peak, your capacity is something on the order of 600 to 700 cars per lane per hour. That's each individual lane. So if you have two lanes, double it, etc. Average occupancy during peak is going to be about 1.1. So let's just say 700 people past a point an hour. Okay, every time bike or bikes go by, somebody yell out the number, 1 or 2 or whatever. Let's just see how much that's used. If they're going in the wrong direction, yell out wrong way. And if on the sidewalk, yell out sidewalk. And let's just see what we observe for the rest of our presentation and Q&A period. I have a feeling we are not going to get anywhere even close to 300 to 400, which is what you would expect in an off-peak hour. Okay.
One.
Thank you. All right. Again, you've heard this before. And so I will make an implicit literacy assumption, and you understand it the first time. As it's being implemented, and you've seen that quote before, so let's keep going on. Transit doesn't relieve congestion. Here is a study that I did for Reason, co-authored with Reason quite a while ago, and what this shows, I think very conclusively, that when you ask somebody to point out where an improvement in transit resulted in an improvement in congestion, a reduction of congestion, there is nothing for them to point to. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Did everybody get that message? I said nothing. Okay. Okay. So transit's a very small niche player. Then what we have is the iron law of freeways, which is if by some happen chance there's an open slot somewhere, a new car will appear as if by magic to replace and fill the hole. And this has been articulated for years. Tony Downs, who is a very good researcher, has articulated it. He calls it the triple convergence, because if freeway lanes open up, if more capacity is put on a freeway or on an arterial street, people will change the time of day they drive to take advantage of it. They will change the route they take because now the freeway has more capacity, or they will come back from transit to driving. This is a good thing. This is a government asset that you paid for that is being fully utilized quickly. Isn't that a good thing? I can point to a lot of rail lines that don't have that problem. So what we also see is there's absolutely no substitute for auto. They're trying to drive people off the streets. What are they supposed to do? Transit is not there and it doesn't work for them. If you're not going downtown and you're doing what is very, very common, the vast majority, you are going a suburb to suburb commute. Transit simply does not work. If you have a local trip in your neighborhood, transit does not work very well. So They can't do anything about transit not working well, so the only thing they can do is make auto work better with no alternative, with no substitute. We are dealing with idiots, either that or masochists. Okay, so what we're dealing with, this is a vampire situation. They're taking the blood flow off our roads. Well, what do you do with a vampire? Well, in the old days, of course, it was a wooden stake through the heart. This is a little bit different type of vampire. And this being transit, we, of course, are going to need a golden stake through the heart. And what is that? That's your vote. Get out and vote. And try to find people who can take a good position and keep it. Okay. Now, problem with complete streets is there's quite a few things that people are trying to put on them. And unfortunately, these do not play together well. You try to put too many things with too many different characteristics, it doesn't work. They do not play together well. Talk to a park ranger who has ever been responsible for a wilderness trail that was supposed to be both a hiking trail and off-road bikes. And you are good for the next hour. The collisions are bad enough, but wait till they start telling you about the fights and worse. And some of the things are absolutely crazy. I saw a proposal, I was asked to look at a proposal from Tampa a couple of months ago. They wanted to take off 2 traffic lanes on a 4-lane, 2 in each direction, arterial street for 4 buses an hour in each direction. Okay, peak, we're talking again, roughly 700 people past a point. The bus, if they filled them up, which they never will, with 60 people, that's 240. What would be more common there, I looked at their statistics, they'd be lucky if they got 15 per bus. This is what we're talking about, and yet to some people, dedicating lanes is a good idea. Okay, my scene is do it on dedicated lanes, dedicated pathways we've been talking about. Some of these can work very well. This is Curitiba, Brazil. They have 5 busways coming in the center. This is an 80-foot double articulated bus that will have 270 people in it. Every 45 seconds, 30,000 people an hour, which is about 3 or 4 times what the red and purple lines cover. And of course, you have the one-way streets for roads on either side. This is a bus bulb in San Francisco. So what you have here, they took away the parking, which could be another lane, traffic lane during peak hours, and they built this out. Well, what's the problem? Well, this bus, if it does the usual thing and pulls in here, and it can get stuck during a green light because there's so much traffic coming by, it can't get past. So it can lose the light. So that's a problem. So they do this. The only problem is, how many cars get stuck behind it every time? Now, there is another solution to it. If you go across the street, look across the street, past the corner there, you will see something we call a far side stop. In other words, the bus stop is on the far side of the street from the traffic signal. So the bus pulls there. It gets across the street on the green, it fills up, drops off, and then it's able to pull off after the traffic has passed. Does that work perfectly every time? No. Does it work better than this? A lot of times it does. Why don't they at least think about that or try that first? Let the actual transportation and traffic engineers have a shot rather than the politicos. Here's another one. This is in Cleveland. This is in the middle of the street. You notice the buses going the wrong direction. That's a car going that way, but the doors are on the right side. So the bus traffic zone, loading zone, is in the middle of the street. People have to get to it by crossing the street, which they often do unsafely. So they're very happy with it. What's a success? Something that gets built. What's a great success? Something where the expansion is approved before the initial one goes into operation. Okay. Here's another one I worked on. This is the Orange Line. The original was that dedicating the roadway in the San Fernando Valley was going to take 28 minutes from North Hollywood to Warner Center. But if they did rapid bus, like they did on Wilshire with the 720 or on Ventura Boulevard, I'm sorry, wrong one, in the valley, which they did on the 750 line, it would take 50 minutes, which was remarkable considering their actual schedule was 45 minutes at the time. We went through a whole series. Finally, when they finally approved the going ahead the second time after we challenged them and forced them to stop, they admitted that it would take 40 minutes on the dedicated lines, what was built, and that doing it with running on the surface with traffic signal preference and limited stops would be faster. And then, of course, once they started operating, it was slower still. Truth and facts have nothing to do with these decisions. So, conclusions. Things are all screwed up. That's the summary. You have my list in front of you. Have fun. It's up to you. You have to make the difference. You have to meet with the planners, try to convince them, or at least find out what shit they're trying to sell and record it, and then get to the experts, and we will be happy to help you articulate what's wrong and what should be changed. Thank you very much.
So, first question to the panel. You guys have touched on this a lot. What is the proper balance between road design and enforcement in terms of making sure that all users are safe? John, you had alluded to that, but I'm just curious, what role does design play and what role does enforcement play?
I will say that if the road is designed in the traditional way, according to users who obey the rules of the road, then enforcement simply is to catch the people who deliberately cheat. If, on the other hand, the road is designed as it is outside here to make a mess of things, enforcement ain't going to help anything. It's a mess to start with and dangerous for cyclists.
It starts with education, and education has to start early. In Germany, an 8-year-old trying to get a bicycle license, I say again, a license to ride a bicycle, is generally far more knowledgeable than our 16-year-olds when they get their driver's license. By the way, how many parents out there? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people were real successful in trying to teach their 4-year-old how to cross the street and not cross the street? Oh, no. Oh, gee, I don't see what the problem is. This is all natural. Okay, so education started and reinforced and make people respect what's right. And this will, I think, only take 20, 30, maybe 40, 50 years before it starts to work through the entire population. One of the most important things is uniformity. We have what is called the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And it's basically everything you ever wanted to know about how to design a street. Most states, including California, have their own version. By the way, the Institute of Transportation Engineers has a standing reward for anybody who can come up with a pronounceable acronym for the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. This you will not find anywhere. What does that mean? It's illegal. That's what it means. Do you think anybody's going to tell the people in LA DOT? And frankly, I don't think this is really an LA DOT problem. One of the things you have to understand is the people in government, whether they are planners, engineers, or whatever, they like to keep their jobs. Mm-hmm. Telling a city council person that he or she is a frigging idiot is generally not considered career enhancing.
Well, and you anticipated actually a comment, and fire codes all over the country are actually pretty uniform. They're actually literally modeled on what's called the International Fire Code. This is put together every 2 years by experts. They come together to update the code based on experience, based on changes to the built environment, etc. So the California State, County of Los Angeles, and City of Los Angeles fire codes are all identical, almost verbatim. They tweak them here and there. But the main provisions are verbatim from this model fire code. Well, guess what? In 2012, they added a provision, you can look it up, section 503.4.1, my favorite law in the world, and I'm a lawyer. It says traffic calming measures are prohibited unless approved by the fire code official. That means Chief Terrazas has to come out here and look at this, or somebody acting under color of his authority, and put his John Hancock on it. Every single road diet in Los Angeles and in California is illegal, because we've looked into this through records requests. We've talked to a ton of firefighters off the record, as Tom was alluding to just now. If you walk into, as a matter of fact, fun exercise, this is a takeaway, go to your local fire station and just walk in the door and ask them what they think about road diets. Give yourself a couple hours. Every single one is currently in violation of the fire code. Now, 503.4.1. There's another provision as well that says fire apparatus access roads shall be free of obstructions, including parked vehicles, at all times. A fire apparatus access road is defined as any surface street, including private roads, that a fire emergency vehicle may use to travel from the station to the scene. Strike two. Julie, you had a question?
A couple of years ago, the city of Baltimore was having a fight with the city over road diets, because literally the streets are very narrow there, and they could not they cannot turn their fire engines.
Right.
So it was a huge fight. It was in the papers almost every day. And so what the compromise they came up with is to make the fire engines smaller, which I find outrageous, because that is so much money and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted someone to talk about that.
Well, so the situation in Baltimore is actually even more layered than that, believe it or not. A firefighter union, so there's Baltimore City Fire Department, Baltimore County, like we have City and County of LA here. A City of Baltimore firefighting crew made a video. They showed how impossible it was. Now, you know East Coast cities, whether it's Baltimore, Philly, Boston, they're all brownstones, 4, 5, 6 stories. So all of their firefighting apparatus are custom built to be able to navigate those specific built environments. So this fire crew made a video demonstrating that we cannot get up to the top 2 floors. So if you're on the 4th or 5th floor, best of luck. You know what the Baltimore City Council did? They changed the fire code. So now that is totally permissible for fire tower apparatus to not be able to reach the top 2 floors. I advise you not to invest in 4th and 5th floor real estate in Baltimore. The council member, I'm sorry, Tom, no. The council member who sponsored that motion just happened to be a former member of Baltimore Rides. And he took the fire crew to task publicly. You can look it up. There's a local blog there called the Baltimore Fishbowl. And if you Google Baltimore Fishbowl firefighting video, you'll see the whole story. And the council member who sponsored this resolution and this change said, well, look at the waste of time and resources that this crew expended in making this silly little video, is what he called it. So what happened in Baltimore, I don't know if Baltimore has bought, they call them Vision Zero fire trucks. I know San Francisco has. The good news is there's not really too many natural disasters up in San Francisco, so they'll be fine. Yeah.
One thing to keep in mind, that if the truck can't reach it, that means a firefighter in turnout gear, which weighs 30 pounds, gets to go up the stairs carrying another 100 pounds. Mm-hmm. If they're in really good shape, they say they can do 25 floors an hour. So even the 5th and 6th floors, if you've got to carry it up hand in hand, which takes a lot more time, in addition to the weight, you are putting a lot of people at risk. That right there, if that was downtown, you would lose at least one floor in what the fire department could cover from your standard 6-story truck.
Okay, question for Mr. Rubin. Gavin Newsom, through the HCD, just decreed Southern California has to build 1.3 million new homes. SCAG says they're going to fight them and bring it down to 400,000. I think they're crazy either way. What say you? Where are all these people going to drive? That translates to, what, 3 to 5 million new people?
Well, the first two answers are, one, the number is invalid. Excuse me. It was based on an estimate from McKinsey a few years ago of 3.5 million, which turned out to be based on totally non-California values, New York values. The proper number, you can argue about it, probably about 1.3 for the state, not for Southern California. Second, trying to come up with how are we going to afford that, and then what will be built, etc. At some point, we need to say our infrastructure seems to be built out. And it's not only roads and public transit. How about water? How about not only new water, but used water? Do we have the infrastructure to handle that? And I could keep going. PG&E in my part of the world is having a little trouble trying to get its gas lines and electric lines to be even halfway safe. So let's start with what we have. And in the meantime, why do we keep approving more office structure when we don't have the homes? Maybe perhaps we should say, look at Stockton, which has a lot more homes, including some they're still trying to sell from 2008. And maybe we should try to encourage businesses to invest in new jobs there. But that is contrary to what anybody in the Bay Area wants to do.
You know, you suggested something while you were getting the next microphone. There's another issue that's related to all this, the homeless crisis. Last year in the city of Los Angeles, there were 2,300 fires started by homeless encampments, homeless activity, etc. Those are just the ones that got reported, by the way. After the Lake Balboa fire last month, I went down and spoke with some of the folks who live in one of the 4 other camps that they didn't clear out. And one fellow said to me, oh yeah, we put out fires every day. Every day. Again, go to your local fire station, ask this question. How many of the fires, active fires, that you are called to every day, every month, are some way connected with the homeless? Most of them will say all of them. I interviewed a crew, I can't say where, on the west side. 5 p.m. on a Sunday, they said, we've been called to 8 today. And we had to drive down a road diet to get to 4 of them. So we're piling danger on top of danger on top of danger. So when you see this video, when you hear these statistics, bear in mind that as the homeless crisis continues to expand and spiral, that danger is only going to grow more acute, especially in high fire hazard zones. Sir.
Yeah, I grew up in England. In elementary school, we had to take bicycle training. Can you hear me? Where we rode around the village green with a teacher at every corner explaining, get into the center, stay left, etc., etc. And so we were trained to ride bikes. I have never seen a cyclist on the wrong side of the road in Britain riding. They are on the correct side of the road. You may be amused to find that people instinctively flinch left. That's why aircraft carriers always have the control tower on the right. The only Japanese ones built with a control tower on the left were failures because trees kept going into planes kept climbing. So left driving is much safer, but I don't think we should change it. The question is, why, when I came here in 14, moved to San Diego County, and no cyclist seemed to have any concept whatsoever what even side of the road they were riding on. I mean, many of them were riding on the wrong side, which here happens to be on the left. Yes, And a teacher actually said, well, I think that's probably better. Why no training for cyclists?
I'm going to add a bit to your British experience. I did 1,500 miles bicycle touring with my lady friend in 1985, I think it was, visiting all the places I used to live at. And the only people we saw who were wearing helmets and were riding on the wrong side of the road were Americans.
That's pretty much true. By the way, everybody here remember the movie African Queen, or perhaps Horatio Hornblower? John's father was the screenwriter and author, as well as a large number of other screenplays and novels. And I didn't know that for years until I stumbled on that. Yeah, it's amazing. We do not educate. We do not license. We do not have licenses for the actual bikes, which is one of the reasons they get stolen quite a bit. If we had license and registrations and serial numbers, it would be of some aid. Some. Unfortunately, one of the truest parts of everything we do is you can't make anything foolproof. The fools are too damn ingenious. And safety, this is one of the things we live with all the time. We have this don't blame the victim. Take a look at the statistics. And Kathleen, why don't you talk about this, what you developed?
Most pedestrian deaths occur between the hours of 6 p.m. and midnight. 75% of them happen in darkness. 75%. So maybe there are other problems besides vehicles just hitting them. And it was 50% of them have a BAC level of 0.08 or over. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary. So maybe we should have traffic stops for bicyclists. But I mean, we need to look at what is happening, the truth of what's happening, not just blaming the vehicle.
And that's just alcohol. They did not test, they did not have statistics on any other substance that could have been inhibiting performance. And we hear all the time about distracted drivers. My God, distracted walkers? I have videos in my transit collection of people who got their nose in their smartphone walking right off the edge of a subway platform. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. And are we...
We have time for one more question. Talk about obeying regulations. I'll go again. Scooters are the bane of my life. I live on Spring Street in downtown Los Angeles. Somebody needs to educate them about not going on the sidewalk, stuff like that. But my main comment is, I live on Spring Street, and that's different than here. And I'm wondering if you comment, in fact, in downtown LA, one of my goals is to educate transit users and advocates that maybe road diets aren't a great idea everywhere. But also educate people who are against road diets to see maybe in downtown LA there might be a case for busways, because in that case there is so many people using the bus, it would actually make it faster for everybody else. So I wondered you'd comment on that, and then the general idea of improving bus service in the central core where it can work. Like somebody pointed out that there's multiple destinations in LA, and Garrett Walker, who writes about improving public transit, says that's a benefit for LA bus use. In the area from La Cienega east, that's a perfect area for public transit, and it can really work there. So if you can comment.
Well, on transit, I agree with that, particularly downtown. I tried to do this is over 20 years ago. Broadway was transit central and still is. We would have 180 buses an hour, peak direction. 3 buses a minute going down Broadway in each direction. I was trying to get Broadway a total bus lane. That was it. Move the cars somewhere else.
it could be justified. We did not have enough capacity on Broadway. Well, MTA has, in their own way, solved it. They've cut back bus service quite a bit. And if you get rid of enough riders and you raise the fares high enough and don't operate the service, this is a wonderful way to free up money to spend on building rail lines. And again, the statistic since 2007, when we've been building rail lines like crazy, for every for every new rail rider, we lose 5.7 bus riders. And by the way, most of the rail riders are former bus riders. And the total trips go up because it forces more transfers. So the number of people using transit in LA to get to work has gone down by more than half since 1985. And you've approved 4 half-cent sales taxes and more to come.